Okay, apparently we're live on the air and this hangout. Hi there, I'm Coach Redpill. I'm here with Orwell and Good, and we're just going to be shooting the breeze for a while. And we already started shooting the breeze a bit just before this stream started, so we'll just continue. We were talking about each other's content. And what I want to ask Orwell is, where the hell do you get all this shit that you post? Because it's so goddamn funny. Do you like create it, or do you pick it up from other people? You know, I mean, where's that all coming from? Because you're... Oh, wait. Something's happening. There we go.
I think, yeah, you're using your YouTube.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that was my accident. Anyway, going back to your question, you know, so much of your stuff is just so hilarious. And I just want to know where you get it, and you tinker with it. Please tell us.
Well, I make about 25–30% of the memes I post, and I'm an admin on quite a few Facebook pages, so a lot of stuff gets put through there, which I just take and post onto my personal page and onto Twitter, and it just blew up. Like the news clippings and stuff like that, 95% of that stuff I do myself, and wherever I can, I try to source the original creator so that they get the credit for their original piece of work. Now, a lot of the stuff that I see, you have to really know where to look for it. Sort of the news stuff. I mean, 4chan's very good for it, but you got to sift through a whole lot of other stuff and make sure you really check to see if those stories are real. There was one incident where there was this fake story about Sweden, which went semi-viral within about an hour, and then the author of the article said, "I never wrote that." I was like, "Oh shit, oh crap!" It's really embarrassing. So make sure you check if there's something really sort of cancerous. Just make sure you double check to see if it's a real article. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, yeah, you just got to look for stuff and have a lot of templates at the ready, and you know, just do it from there. And it's great fun to see how your profile and persona grows online. It's become a hobby, and if you can turn this hobby and maybe provide some new content, say like writing articles or doing live streams and videos, then why not turn what you find fun into a bit of a living or an income stream?
Yeah, I mean, a perfectly reasonable thing. Okay, and we all want to be basically earning money off of doing the stuff that we like. You know, not just having like a regular job where we're sort of like slaving away our time in order to pay the bills. You know, so yeah, I'm all in favor of the idea of monetizing what you're doing. And you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable and decent. In my own case, I think that well, I've been very upfront about the reason that I started doing my thing is that I'm 49, and I have a 2-year-old son. And the thing is, see, when my kid is finishing college, I'm going to be 70. So I figure that, you know, it'd be smart to start like doing shit now that he can watch when he's a lot older, because I might not be around when he's older, when he's old enough to get this shit, right? And it's stuff that I want him to know. And so that's why I called it Coach Redpill, which I cringe at the goddamn name. But I mean, it's just fucking stupid, man. But it just keeps me on point. And you know, whenever I'm not sure as to what topic I'm going to do, I just refer to the name, and I'm like, that's what I got to talk about this time. I got to talk about this thing here. Like right now, I'm looking at 5 posts that I'm going to be doing over the next week. I'll tell you right now the titles. That one is called. It's going to be called either Hero Worship or Don't Hero Worship. Obvious what it's about. Another is called Soft Spots, which is about how, you know, a lot of times you have a soft spot, you know, something that an emotional vulnerability, and the way to make sure that nobody pokes at it is to never refer to it. And if anybody accidentally pokes it, just pretend that it never happened. Just don't even mention it, no matter how much it hurts, right? Another one is called Recognize Compliance Tests, you know, and another one is called Deal Addiction, which is actually kind of interesting because it's about how I knew this guy, business guy. He'd inherited a lot of money, and he was addicted to making deals. You know, to the feeling of completion when you cut a deal. And the thing is, often as not, he'd wind up talking himself into signing a bad deal because he just needed that rush of like, ooh, I signed a deal. you know, and it's actually a real thing. It doesn't sound real, but it's really, but anyway, my point is, insofar as my own content is concerned, I just sort of make it off of whatever is happening at the moment. I sort of like jot down an idea and then sketch out a script. Not even a script, it's more like I jot down bullet points as to what I want to cover, and just go ahead and do it. And it's a lot of fun. I just did one on Trump, and my subscriber base got so pissed at me, right? Because it was the first time in a long time that my subscribers have been pissed at me. Don't have much respect for Donald Trump. I don't think that he's a 4D chess grandmaster, you know, God Emperor genius. I think he's, you know, a very good salesman. And he's sold the American people on his presidency, but I don't think that he's delivering. But be that as it may, I antagonize my people. Does that ever happen to you? Do you ever like float something out there that just really pisses people off?
Not really. I mean, I try to kind of keep my content more moderate. So there is a problem when you do try to produce content for a broad church, is that you get conflicts anyway. I mean, you will always have haters no matter what you do. And I find that if you maybe like talk about the same things over again and really try to hammer home your key points. And I think there's a lot to be said about, say, Austrian economics, which has a lot of validity as to why Western civilization is crumbling. There's a whole theory called time preference theory, which can be kind of amalgamated with certain, I don't know, offshoots of theories within biodiversity, such as arcade selection theory and antisocial personality disorder and things like that. So I come from a right libertarian perspective, a sort of paleo-libertarian, as little government involvement in your life as possible, and that should wrought stronger societies. But at the moment, it's completely impractical, and I kind of distance myself from the libertarian community because they absolutely hate me. They just call me alt-right for bringing stuff up like arcade selection theory and human biodiversity, and the problem with having open borders in our current society. When you see how Hispanics vote, you're going to have a democratic country from here on until eternity, and your libertarian utopian fantasies are just going to wither away. So it's more, you've got to kind of like pick which kind of target audience you want to accept your views. So say if you want to put forward some economic views that may influence a group of people who may be for a particular social program, try to explain in the easiest way possible what the consequences of implementing that social program would be in a logical sense. So say, for example, I don't know, say if we were to extend welfare to more people, what would be the effect of that? Then, okay, you've got to recognize that people respond to incentives, and then if you have an extension of the welfare state, then more people are going to be incentivized to go on the welfare rolls if they're, you know, if there's a better trade-off of living on welfare than working a $20,000 a year job 40 hours a week. So you've got to kind of pick your battles and trying to figure out where you could maybe win people over.
Yeah. Well, who are you trying to win over?
Oh, I'm trying to maybe kind of prevent people from going down this whole sort of European social democratic model where the government pretty much controls everything and all your disposable income is spent on just frivolities and materialism, because I believe that that's one of the reasons why Western birth rates are declining. So I don't want, say, a lot of nationalists will be like, well, if getting universal healthcare and more government programs and having a European-style social democratic model in America is what's needed to ensure a larger vote share, then that needs to be done. But you know, the kind of thing I want to say is, well, hang on. Do you really want there to be a really dysgenic government program in the place, and all these inflationary pressures and progressive taxation, which makes it difficult for productive people to have children because their disposable income evaporates every year? And then, of course, you have other things like feminism and cultural Marxism and postmodernism, being pushed at universities, which makes productive people less inclined to have children because they believe, having children is bad for the environment, or white people are racist. The way to get rid of whiteness is to have less children. And then, of course, you have all these government pressures, such as taxation and inflation, which makes it more difficult to afford having children if that's what you want. And then people who live off welfare to have more children, and people in the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder will have every positive incentive to nice of a better phrase.
You got it.
Yeah.
Well, no, like in my sense, I think that this whole thing's going straight to hell. I mean, it just seems that we're on the Western civilization had its moment in the sun, and it was a brilliant moment in the sun, right? But I think really, term and medium term is that the West, the democratic, enlightened West, the rational West that has created this miracle of technology and all the rest of it, it's going straight to hell. And this cultural Marxism has metastasized to every level of government, every level of industry, every private enterprise. I dare you to name me one industry that is not dominated by SJWs. Even the fucking military is dominated by SJWs nowadays.
Oh, I know, right? I know. I worked in banking for a few years, and although they had all diversity champions, they had champions for people with disability, people of color, disabled lesbians who identify as monkeys on the subway. And these are losers. Big global banks. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they're fucking losers. Oh man, it drives me nuts because they are willing to lose money for the sake of this weird religion, because it's not even like a policy at this point. It has become a religion. They're all fucking nuts as far as I'm concerned. I mean, maybe I'm just showing my age, but the thing is, see, back in the 70s and 80s, nobody in their right mind would have dreamed of pushing this kind of ideological bullshit, and certainly never dreamed of pushing this ideological bullshit at the cost of profits and productivity and success in the private market. I mean, nobody, okay? But here you have companies like, I follow Diversity in Comics. You ever heard of that channel on YouTube?
No, I haven't.
You should check it out. It's terrific. And Diversity in Comics is basically this guy, Zach. He's like a veteran, and he's crazy about comic books. And he does like 3 or 4 streams a day about comics. I mean, I don't know where he finds the time. But anyway, he's chronicling how the comic book industry has gone down the tubes, right? And he talks about the numbers of the issues sold for these various comics that are completely dominated by SJWs, right? And it's insane. It's completely insane. And it's insane how the artists are pushing like SJW shit. Like, for instance, right now there's like this big scandal because G.I. Joe, the fucking most, like militaristic, most masculine, red pill that you could think of. The cover art shows basically what can only be described as fully clothed gay porn. Okay, it's fucking horrible, right? And the thing is, see, everybody's okay with this, right? And people aren't objecting to it, and the sales are on the floor. I mean, they're really just awful. But everybody's just like, oh, that's the way it is. We have to have diversity. We have to have inclusiveness. We have to have, I'll tick all these diversity boxes. The audience, because people aren't buying this stuff because they think it's shit. Yeah. Yeah. And it drives me nuts that the West is just very placidly, and private enterprise is very placidly going along with this shit. Back in the 90s, there would be a lot of this inclusivity shit and diversity and so on, and it was strictly, everybody recognized it was strictly a PR move. And everybody would laugh about it. And everybody would say, oh, check out this company, they have like the black person there just to show that they have black people, the minority hire, right? But yeah, it was sort of like cynical at that time. But now they believe this shit. How the hell did that happen? I don't get it. I'm just,
it's a religion. It's a religion. And I mean, you look at people like Dostoevsky, they predicted this kind of stuff. When the church dies out, people are going to have to find something greater than themselves, and they found it in progressivism. And yeah, the progressive stack and all these weird diversity quotas that they have to enforce upon the whole world is just, it is a form of religion. This sort of aversion to basic biological reality and basic just human nature. It's a sickness. It's sort of this distorted nihilistic sickness that's been begun to consume the West, and this is one of the reasons why I did a paper for my degree on why Scandinavian countries had the highest antidepressant consumption rates in the world. One of the main factors for it was the shit weather and the long winters with no sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
But
sure.
These countries are very atheistic, and they have enormous welfare states. And you can see that there's almost a direct correlation in people's belief in God, in people's church attendance, and the growth in the welfare state and subsequent tax rates to have to pay for these things. Mm-hmm. So it's basically just a smooth, well, I wouldn't say, well, smooth is probably not the right word, but it's just a transition between and statism or progressivism, whatever you want to call it. It's all just repackaged forms of communism, and you have to demoralize countries in order for the revolution to occur. When people are too demoralized in their nations, in their cultures, in their religion, they have nothing to fight for. The nihilism takes over. A nihilistic, ununified country, it's just very easy to start imposing your totalitarian will upon them, because they've got nothing to fight for. They've got nothing keeping them together.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, while we're talking, I'm cracking open a bottle of Pinot Grigio. So as we get, as I get progressively drunker during the stream, you'll just have to make more sense. Okay. So yeah, so that way I have permission, tacit permission that, you can keep on dominating the conversation. I'll just like do a little hiccup and say, yep, you're right. More drunkenly as the stream continues. But no, talking about Scandinavia, I did a post some time back about Sweden, the arrogance of altruism, because here's something pretty funny about Sweden. See, I come from Chile, right? And and the thing is, everybody in Chile knows this story, which was in 1973 when there was a coup d'état and Pinochet overthrew the Allende government, which was a socialist government that was sending the country down the tubes, right? Well, Sweden, they offered asylum, political asylum, to anybody who would go to their embassy, right? To anyone, okay? So what happened was that a whole bunch of criminals, died in the will criminals, okay, went to the Swedish embassy and consulate and said that, we're being oppressed by the Pinochet government, save us, right? And so the Swedes, paid for their ticket to Sweden, got them housing, got them, everything. Oh, the thought police is coming for me. And they got all kinds of stuff, all kinds of benefits, right? And these criminals, right? Well, they started, their criminal activity in Sweden, right? And now in Sweden, Chileans have this reputation for being criminals, right? And the thing is, see, in Chile, everybody thought it was so funny that these stupid Swedes would simply accept anybody who claimed to be a political dissident, okay? And because the people who were actual political dissidents, yeah, a few of them took them up on the offer, right? A lot more of them went to East Germany and France and West Germany and what have you. But the point is, the Swedes opened themselves up out of an arrogance to show the world that they were the most moral, right? Thing, if you think about it, going back to religion and belief, in the past, people would express their devotion by other means, right? But it seems as if that they would, build a church, they would do a parade or whatever, or they would flagellate themselves or what have you. I can't think of a religious expression at this time that they would carry out. But nowadays, it's this virtue signaling, and it seems to me that the Swedes, for all intents and purposes, have destroyed their own country out of this secular virtue signaling. Recapture that sense of Does what I say make sense to you?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And just to add to your point, you have a few journalists trying to advocate for a post-truth world. So people lead with their feelings. And if all that people know is government school, government subsidized universities and cultural Marxism, you're going to be molded to feel bad when you see a minority hurting. Oh, these people got exiled. They did nothing wrong. They're just trying to stand up against this tyrannical dictator in Chile. So, oh, they've come here in search of a better life. It's not their fault that they're committing crimes. It's just the way that they've been brought up, and it's just because they're acting out because they had to withstand such a horrible time in Chile. So people are guided by their feelings instead of sort of a semi-objective moral value structure. And progressivism is, we have these people virtue signaling fanatically and trying to be altruistic and in a really sort of twisted sense that it's kind of like an extreme version of altruism and self-sacrifice, where you're pretty much erasing yourself just to make sure the other person is comfortable. And this is kind of replaced sort of Christian moral values. And it's what's going to finally kill Northern Europe, I believe, because they're just so fanatically tolerant that they just tolerate anything, and they don't.
No. I disagree. They don't tolerate any kind of questioning of this of these policies. They're tolerant of superficial diversity, skin color and what have you. Any kind of wrong think. I mean, there's a famous saying, in Swedish, there's what's called the corridor. That is the corridor of accepted opinion. I mean, so what you're saying, yeah, sure, it would be wonderful if they were truly tolerant, but they aren't. You say the wrong thing, and you can get fired in Sweden. Oh well, now it's happening everywhere. Look what happened to poor James Damore.
Well, it's heresy.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It's heresy.
It's exactly. You're right. Well, that's why I think that we're fucked. Okay, and so my thinking is that the best we can do is learn some lessons and try to figure out a place to go to and a way of living that will skirt the ravages of Western civilization. Because, by the way, I don't think that this is going to happen like tomorrow. I'm not like one of these crazy people who figures that the end of the world is nigh in a literal sense. It'll happen like every great civilization, that it decays and takes many decades, if not centuries, before you come to the bottom, and something new will flower, and that'll be that. I mean, that's always been the course of history. The Roman Empire, if you think about it, started to decay at the end of the reign of Tiberius, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's how many hundreds of years did it take to touch bottom? I mean, it took what, 500-600 years at least before it finally touched bottom. Now, Western civilization, I think it'll take a while. I don't think it'll be 500-600 years, because I think that a lot of our technology and our infrastructure depends on so much technology and so many people who actually know what they're doing, that once those people start being edged out, the fall might be quicker. To tell you the truth, and this might sound really random, but it's not so random if you start to think about it. The thing that has me really, really worried are nuclear reactors. Because, see, those bad boys, you need somebody who's doing to be supervising that thing all the time, or else you get Fukushima or Chernobyl, right? It's nothing to mess around. It's not like a Roman aquifer that nobody was monitoring it and fell into decay, and okay, it's not the end of the world, it can be fixed. Nuclear reactor is not like that. And so my only concern about the decay of our civilization is frankly all this, nuclear reactors and this nuclear weaponry, not because I think somebody's going to be able to find it and use it. It's just dangerous, just lying around, this shit, right? That's my only concern. But aside from that, and perhaps it sounds peripheral or off the wall, but be that as it may, I think that we're on the downslope. My own thinking is that the apogee of our Western civilization was like around 1964, and that we've been on a slow downward trajectory ever since. You're an economist. You tell me. Where do you think was the apogee of our civilization?
1913. Maybe slightly before that, maybe the inception of the progressive era, so around about the Hispano-American War, whatever it's called, sort of about 1885-ish, when Western governments started taking over the money supply and started using the money supply to further their own political agendas and to pay people off, that's when it really, really started to take a hit. Bearing in mind, I strongly believe that the two world wars would have been completely impossible if money was managed under private control rather than state control.
Why do you think that?
Because it would have taken something like 14 times the amount of gold in existence to afford all the weaponry for the First and Second World War combined and other military adventures in the first half of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. If that money was privately owned, then what?
But wait, hang on a second. Tell me about the First World War, because we can posit in our conversation that the Second World War is really an extension of the First World War, and mm-hmm. that we don't really need to bother with the causes of the second, understanding that it came from the first. And therefore, the first is the issue. The First World War is the issue under discussion. A non-fiat money supply have prevented World War I, and because it's not prima facie, it doesn't seem obvious to me.
Well, because if the government can print as much money as possible and divert resources and time and labor to building weaponry, then if that money's in private hands, how do you extract the money? It's just completely inefficient. You have to tax people a lot more in order for that to come about. And the distributor of money, if you were to create gold out of thin air, or if you were to start debasing it, that would constitute fraud and be illegal. But since it's under the control of government, there's no such standard there for not committing fraud.
I'm not sure I see it. Okay. I mean, understand what
I'll explain it a different way. There's something called the Cantillon effect, where let's say the entire amount of money in existence is $3,000, right? I own 1,000, you own 1,000, and the government own 1,000. So in terms of monetary wealth, we each own a third. Then the government decides to print another $1,000. Then we each own a quarter, but the government owns 50%. Right?
Yep.
So basically, when the government is in control of the money supply, and when it inflates the money supply, it is effectively pilfering your wealth, but very subtly. So it has a higher proportion of the money in circulation in order to pay for things like armament.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I mean,
you're basically saying that the government just prints willy-nilly in order to pay off whatever is required at a given moment.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but that's not how the money supply works.
Well, that's how central banks can operate. I mean, if you have it at your disposal, then why wouldn't you use it?
No, I'm thinking. I'm thinking about the issue. I'm not too clear about that, but let's see that aside for the moment, because the more interesting question to me is trying to identify the apogee of the West. Now, you're going all the way back to 1913, but do you think that nothing after 1913, between 1913 and 1963, just to set an arbitrary 50-year window, nothing was good in that window? Well, yeah, the obvious. But apart from the obvious, there was nothing good. You don't feel that there was any kind of progress? More people were living in better conditions by 1963 than in 1913?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, you do have the baby boom, but you also have some very cancerous movements towards the latter end of that 50-year period. There's a group of academics, shall we say, that left Germany in the later part of the 30s and managed to install themselves in Western institutions and start their very cancerous views, which became influential in basically pulling apart the family structure at the seams. I mean, Herbert Marcuse is the big guy. His essay Eros and Civilization pretty much single-handedly inspired the sexual revolution.
Well, I think it was the pill. I mean,
yeah,
I think
alongside the pill, that just facilitated it. But then you have the intellectual doctrine behind it and the pill at the same time. So if the pill were to be invented, say, in the middle half of the 19th century, it wouldn't have had such a deleterious effect to Western civilization.
I'm not sure about that. I think that, I mean, if you were talking about if the pill had been invented in the middle of the 19th century, then people would have latched onto something written by, I don't know, Byron or somebody like that at that time period. I think it was just a coincidence so far as Marcuse and the pill. The pill had been invented earlier or later, Marcuse would have been irrelevant. I think my thinking has always been that the pill, the ability to divorce sexual pleasure from procreation, created the conditions of our society, of our hedonistic society. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is. It's a hedonistic society that, you know, prioritizes feeling good over everything else, over anything else, which I think is just absurd. You can't live a life that's based only on pleasure. And of course, you say that, and you sound like some fuddy-duddy, some, you know, killjoy, and nobody wants to hang out with you and play ball, right? But you can't live that kind of a life, because on top of that, so much of your life, the satisfactions that you get, the deep-seated, deep-rooted satisfactions that change who you are, come from suffering and struggle to achieve yourself you set for yourself, right? I mean, like, to give an easy example, when you climb Mount Everest, you have a shitty time all the way, you know? You have a shitty time when you get to the base camp, and climbing up to the stupid top of the mountain, right, is miserable, and you get to the very top and you're suffering from hypoxia and you're pretty much hallucinating and going out of your mind and dying at the same time, right? And then you get down, and then you get back to civilization, and the fact that you went through this miserable time, you know, changes you profoundly, right? It changes you for the better. It gives you so much confidence, the struggle, right? And so my thinking is that our society, being so hell-bent on pleasure, I think it comes from the pill. You know, everybody has forgotten that there's more to life than just feeling good and you know, having an orgasm.
But you could also add stuff like alcoholism and recreational drug use into the mix, and other forms of pleasure seeking as well. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely an ideological drive to pull apart society at the seams. And don't forget that the Weimar Republic was very degenerate. Some of the accounts I've read about what went on in the Weimar Republic isn't really stuff for pleasant conversation, shall we say.
No, no, it is not. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I read some decadent shit.
That kind of when were contraceptives really, you know, started becoming more mainstream? At about the 30s, am I right?
I actually would not know. I know about the pill, but I mean, like, other prophylactics, I wouldn't know.
I believe condoms have been around for about 100 or so years. I might be wrong.
The first condoms were actually from the 18th century, I think. You know, I mean, it's like way back when. But and they used like sheep intestines or something horrifying like that. So let's not even go there. But yeah, yeah. Okay, what's your point?
That's just my point, is that in order for there to be this ideological hedonism, you would have to have people in big places pushing this kind of stuff and trying to normalize it. And going back to your point in calling people who say are more traditional, more family-oriented, and less inclined to go out and get wasted, and being called a fuddy-duddy,
yeah,
Hollywood has had a really big hand in promoting that kind of attitude.
Oh yeah.
Just watch any show you want, and like the nerdy guy or the person who decides to forego partying in order to study or get an early night, it's going to be a bit of a lewd, a bit of a reprobate, in the wrong sense for Hollywood. So there's definitely that kind of that kind of portrayal of somebody who wants to take care of themselves, and normies, in light of a better word, will eat that stuff up like Tic Tacs. So there will, a lot of these people would be pro hedonism, and then you have the kind of the thots and the cucks, as Malik Obama would say, and they'll pursue that kind of promiscuous, hedonistic lifestyle without thinking twice about it. It's just the new normal. And then, heck, I did it when I was a student as well, the first time round. So you're kind of tuned to pursue a high time preference lifestyle, sort of this unwillingness to defer gratification. You kind of want to have your fun now. You want to have your cake and eat it now. You want to do everything in the moment. You don't want to wait for tomorrow. Why have kids when they're just going to hold you back and you can't travel the world? This kind of attitude, and this kind of attitude is what makes the state grow, because people don't want to wait in the future for problems to either resolve themselves or for a voluntary resolution to appear. They want, say, a Bernie Sanders type who can promise them the world, say, oh, we're going to have a Danish model in America and it's all going to be hunky-dory, even though we have a $20 trillion national debt, which I don't see how they're going to do. But then again, I mean, you can just deny economic reality when it feels good, am I right?
Yeah, they've been doing it for the last 9 years, ever since the GFC.
Yeah, so people have got this high time preference, which is, I think it's absolutely crucial that people know about time preference theory, because it will make or break civilization. If everyone has a high time preference and people want resolutions and they want things to be done in the here and now and don't want to wait in the future, you're going to have a reversion in the standard of living, because the government's going to have to keep printing and taxing in order to keep you happy for another election cycle. And then people are going to become poorer, gradually poorer. They're not going to have enough disposable income to make any investments, and there's going to be an increasing rift between rich and poor. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have the sort of late state, sort of towards the end of the Roman Empire, where people just flee the city in order to evade the tax collectors, because you're not going to be able to afford anything eventually. And you're going to have what's called capital consumption, which is basically digging into your own capital stock, because you can't keep replacing it. So these things that are producing your nice iPhones are eventually going to go obsolete, and it's going to go back and back and back and back and back until you basically have a sort of return to a more barbarous time. Sorry, that was a lot to unpack.
No, I see where you're going. My thinking is not so much that they're going to raise taxes so much. I think that they've mastered the technique of stealth monetization. At least the American central banks have, of essentially, like, you know, what was QE? It was basically, you know, they just printed up money, went out and bought assets from the banks. And where were the banks getting these assets? Well, there were treasuries. They were getting it from the government. Right now, the U.S. Federal Reserve is the largest holder of U.S. treasuries, I believe, right? And the obvious question, or the obvious observation, why doesn't the Fed simply burn those treasury bonds? You know, just make them vanish, right? And the U.S. government is off the hook insofar as interest payments on those treasuries, interest payments and principal repayment of those treasuries, right? How many trillions of dollars of T-bills does of T-bonds rather does the Fed hold at this time? You know, do you happen to know offhand?
No, I don't.
Fed.
I know that in order to try and quote unquote dig America out of the last recession in 2008, something like $4 trillion were created out of thin air. But I don't understand why they tried to. Well, I do understand why they tried to revert back to these exploded Keynesian fallacies as to how to dig yourself out of an election, out of a recession. It's just to get re-elected. It's all about political power, and you're by lowering interest rates to such a degree, you're creating more malinvestment. And then when these big corporate companies do fail, they can get bailed out, and this is what's causing a huge problem. I don't really care that much about inequality. There's my hot wealth inequality, and there's my hot take. You need wealth inequality for there to be a division of labor. If everyone were a millionaire, then who'd take up the trash?
Yeah, exactly.
But we know that wage rates would eventually adjust to such an extent that somebody would be willing to do so for a high enough wage. But that's not the point. The point is that that you will get a situation like Brazil, where you have basically all these palatial gated communities and you have a favela next to it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're seeing that now in the West, especially since the implementation of all these free trade and free capital movement ideas during the 90s, where all of those manufacturing jobs, those middle class and lower middle class jobs, were shipped off to Mexico and China and Vietnam and Thailand and all the rest of it, right? And so all these middle class, lower middle class workers in the West are now idle and poorer every day. And and on the other hand, you have the top 1% and the service class of that 1%, the top 20%. And they are, increasingly divorced from the rest of society. And so you have an 80% that is becoming poorer and poorer, and a 20% that is becoming richer and richer and more divorced from the rest of the society. Mm-hmm. I think it's something really worrisome, because long term, what will happen is that eventually that 80% will coalesce and want a revolution, and they'll, wind up chopping off the heads of all the 20%ers. And we like it or not, you and I are part of that 20%. And that is very worrisome, that eventually, there'll be some sort of a revolution, I mean, now, is this possible? Yeah, it's possible. Is it likely? Maybe not, maybe so, but you never really know until it happens. Mm-hmm. Everybody said, oh, it's a black, and then it went and did happen. I remember the 2008 financial crisis, right? Everybody said, oh, Bear Stearns is solid as a rock, right? And then it went belly up. I mean, it went belly up like in a spectacular way. And then Lehman Brothers. Everybody said that no way was the government going to let Lehman go. And everybody said on top of that Lehman was not going to go down. It couldn't go down. It was too big to go down. And it went down. And everybody freaked out. And Citibank came within inches of lights out. I mean, they came within inches of going out, feet first. So after 2008, in my own case, that nothing is impossible. Anything can happen. Even something catastrophic, especially something catastrophic, can happen quicker than you could think. Especially now, because we have all of this technology, this communication technology. Hang on a second. Somebody is...
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Hang on. You're gonna have to talk for a bit for the stream, because I got to take this.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello?
In the UK, we saw the Royal Bank of Scotland being bailed out, and apparently it's 81% publicly owned. And the CEO awarded himself an £8.1 million bonus, even though that they're running a loss and being publicly owned at the same time. So it begs questions. Do these companies really?
These companies really what?
The companies really should be allowed to fail. All these big companies, they shouldn't be bailed out. I know it's tough that jobs are going to be lost, but it's the politicians in charge who just want to think about the next election cycle, which is why democracy will always fail, because they're going to do whatever's possible to keep the electorate happy just for another election cycle. And that just adds more and more social problems, more and more debts. And eventually the whole thing will have to collapse. It's a house of cards. And it's almost like what I was saying about the 2008 recession. I think the Democrats may have been lucky to have gotten out in time, because Trump may inherit a terrible recession during his presidency if he stays on for another 4 years after 2020, which at the moment it looks unlikely, because he seems to have been breaking all his promises. So whatever poor schmuck's going to be elected in 2020, I believe is going to have a tremendous economic collapse to inherit, given that the Fed is starting to raise interest rates slowly. We'll have talked about it.
Yeah, well, about the 2008 GFC, global financial crisis, my thinking has always been that they should have let the banks collapse.
Yeah.
And they should just take the hit. Just take the hit and let it happen. Let it all collapse, and take over there is the legal mechanism to take over these banks, and there was personnel to take, and they should, because at the end of the day, a lot of these banks, a lot of them are it's only the top key people that you need to replace. And if you're banks, you really don't have to do a lot in terms of people. I mean, like for instance, Citibank, you would need maybe 500 people, 500 executives, and really a core team of about 20. over the bank. And it's a huge bank, sure, but a lot of it is sort of like not automated, but in the sense that there are departments within the bank that are just going to keep on running whoever's in charge. It doesn't matter. It's a little bit like the electric company, right? But anyway, my point: they should have taken the hit, but they stupidly decided to bail them out. Okay, and for what? Because these banks have never really recovered, and now they're all addicted to this incredibly cheap money. We have this asset inflation, where you have, I have this little crappy little, I don't know, 70 square meter apartment in London, right? And it's worth, over £1 million. What the hell is that all about, right? This asset inflation it's gone, ballistic, right? And nobody's saying anything about it. As to the coming economic crisis, my thinking is that we've got maybe 2-3 more quarters before the shit hits the fan. I actually think that retrospectively, people are going to realize that we started in a recession back in the summer of 17. Because, it always takes a while for the economic metrics to catch up to the reality. And it takes sometimes a quarter or two before, people realize, oh, we've been in a recession since, 4 or 5 months ago. I think that, between October and January, people are going to wise up that we are in a recession. And, this expansion over the last 9 years, this is the longest expansion in history. And it's completely artificial. Mm-hmm. It was concocted by the central banks, who have artificially created all of this money to keep everything afloat.
Yeah.
And they are no longer pursuing any kind of reasonable policy. They are just making up money and just pumping it out there to keep shit afloat. It's got to crash at some point, right? I'm sorry for ranting, but it just drives me a little bit nuts that these morons.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah,
me too. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, just look at what GDP is. It includes government spending, and you kind of want to have a consistent amount of growth. So if you're not getting it from the private sector, you can do it by printing more money and keeping credit. Dishing out cheap credit for these major corporations, which creates a hell of a lot of problems down the line, because there's a lot of malinvestment, and then you have price inflation, which is a nasty little side effect from trying to keep interest rates artificially low, because you have to expand the amount of credit in circulation, which would have a monetary effect down the line. And the other problem is that 80% of economists eventually work for the state. So they're not going to be proposing any major anti-government reforms in anytime soon. And just look at the way I'm not a Chicagoite at all. Just look at the way most mainstream economists treat people like Milton Friedman or his adherents. They absolutely say, "Oh, these people are intransigent, they're stubborn, they're zealots, and blah 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 blah. We need government to step in here, there, everywhere." And I mean, just look. There's absolutely no criticism of the validity of government intervention when it comes to the economy. In universities and schools, it's like a given. And it's like, well, there's all these market failures, but when that happens, it's all right because the government will intervene. But there's no activity towards reducing the amount of government intervention, reducing the amount of government regulation and tax rates in order to try and quote unquote, finely tune the economy.
Yeah. Okay, so we're fucked, basically. But I want to go to the specific question. When do you think, or you and I agree that there is going to be a downturn? It is inevitable that there's going to be a downturn, right? Yeah. Because it's just, right. But the question becomes, when is that going to happen? And how bad do you think it's going to get?
Start buying hard assets now.
Yeah. Well, everybody talks about gold, I mean, gold is like, gotta get gold, right? What do you think is, what's your thing?
I like cryptocurrencies, but they're so new that I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket.
Yeah. My thinking is that the best way to go, anything that what? Are you talking gold, or are you talking other?
It can be anything. It could be property, it could be land, it could be platinum, silver, whatever, anything that retains its value. And of course, there's going to be a tremendous demand shock for all these things when collapse does happen. So you're going to see those things become incredibly valuable if you even just have a tiny bit of them. Say if you have, I don't know, say 100 grams of gold in your possession. I know that's quite a lot, but that stuff's going to really accumulate in value when the money that's being printed out day by day will be rendered nearly worthless. And then you have a flight to real values like the Weimar Republic, where people were just trying to offload their money as soon as possible in exchange for things that are intrinsically valuable, like food and clothes. Just as the last thing, I think the big telling point for when the next collapse will come is when central banks will raise their interest rates. That's when all these malinvestments will become apparent, and that's when you really need to maybe start taking steps to mitigate the disaster. So
yeah, the question is, when are they going to raise interest rates?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on inside their heads. I think they're trying to just offset this for another election cycle, to be quite honest. Whenever they're out of office, then it's the next guy's problem.
Yeah. I want to turn to something else, because I was thinking about the European central banks, right? And realizing that my familiarity with them is iffy. But then it got me thinking about the European Union. And, Juncker gave that big speech the other day, where he's basically saying, the Brits are going to rue the day they left us, and by the way, we're going to get like our own army, and we're going to push more integration, and we're going to like become the United States of Europe. What did you think of that speech? What did you think of that whole, I mean, last year they were saying, oh God, the European Union is in big trouble. Now they're saying, that everything is wonderful and nothing hurts. I mean, what's up with the European Union and their leadership? I mean, they don't seem in touch with reality, it seems to me.
I mean, you could get conspiratorial as to what their end game is, but yeah, at the moment there's just a tremendous disconnect between reality and these people. They're untouchable. They live in their nice gated communities. They're ferried around first class wherever they go. They go to lovely meals all the time, all on the taxpayer dime. So they don't care. They don't care. They're going to do whatever the large corporations wants them to do. In Pat Buchanan's book, Death of the West, this was written in 2001, I believe, he found that in order to keep the state pensions the way they are, you'd have to bring in something like 1.4 billion new workers into Europe. There has to be around 4.8 workers per each retiree.
Right.
So that's terrifying. And this is probably one of the reasons why he wants open borders. But unfortunately, as we established before, people respond to incentives. And if you have a ginormous welfare state and you come from somewhere, say that your GDP per capita per annum is what you can earn in a month of welfare in a North European country, of course you're going to move to the North European country and do nothing. I mean, there's nothing getting on the welfare roll. So it's going to collapse the system anyway. Even if they didn't have a ginormous welfare state or a monetary union, the system would have to collapse anyway, because I mean, Europe is a diverse place, but they do like to say diversity is our strength.
No, I think that the Europeans are going down the tubes, but the thing is that the leadership seems blind to what's going on. But I just feel, I just shake my head. And finally, I just want to ask you quick, because I was figuring, we'd go up on on a stream for about an hour, and we're coming up on an hour. I just want to ask you a quick question about Buenos Aires. How are things going in Argentina?
They're all right at the moment. They voted in a sort of center-right neoliberal.
Let me just butt in a second for our listeners, because who might not know. Argentina is this country. It periodically goes bust. Okay, in 2001, it had a complete meltdown, right? And then it recovered, and then it's had like some issues, and it's like a yo-yo. It's up and down all the time, and remarkably quickly. Okay, so that's why I'm wondering how are things going in Argentina, because how are things going in Argentina is sort of like how's the weather in the Caribbean. It changes all the time. So that said, please tell us how things are going in Argentina.
I mean, basic commodities are really expensive. Food is really expensive. Just let it be known that Argentina has it ranks about 154 in the Heritage Foundation Economic Freedom Index. So it hasn't got a free economy. It's still very socialistic. You have something like 8 million people in the private sector supporting 20 million people in the public sector. So they scratch their heads and wonder why isn't our economy growing? Why do we have these periodic crashes? Well, I mean, just look how many people are basically parasites. So they're not learning in that respect. They love controlling the economy. They love all these ridiculous monetary policies, one which ended up with basically their currency just being rendered valueless overnight in 2001, which is a complete disaster. It lost something like, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was just startling to see that one day to the next, it just lost so much of its value. I mean, if you look at the GDP of Argentina over the last 10 years by quarter, it just fluctuates. It looks like a heartbeat. It's just... but they never learn, and I think one of the problems is, and this is the problem with sort of too much nationalism, and I'm going to say that in italics. You can pretty much peddle any social program you want and any form of resentment you want to the electorate in order to get power, and this is what kind of happens to your country if that's used as a bludgeon to, put across your political agenda. In the 1930s, in the 1920s and 30s, Argentina had, I believe it was the 9th highest GDP in the world. And that's because they had a relatively high degree of economic freedom. And then you had a lot of years of corporativist or fascistic economic planning, whatever you want to call it, through the Peron years. And they had a dirty war. And it's been a political and economic mess for the last 80 years here, to be honest. And
there's a question here on the stream. Somebody asking, is Argentina going full Venezuela?
I hope not. Cristina Kirchner might get into power again, but I doubt it will. It'll have its collapses, but it should rebound soon. And there seems to be more of an economic libertarian groundswell at the moment. So hopefully they will become more influential in years to come to maybe prevent another one of these collapses in the future. But again, Peronism is a very powerful tool. The sort of an amorphous form of nationalism, which can be used at any moment to obviously get the Peronist politician in power. Now, if you look across the border in Chile, the cost of living there is a lot cheaper. Consumer goods are a lot cheaper. There's a better quality in goods. There's a better choice in goods. And you get a lot of Argentinians crossing the border and buying all their clothes and stuff like that in Chile because it's so much cheaper. And well, look how much freer the Chilean economy is compared to Argentina's, and there's your answer. There's one thing I wanted to talk about really quickly about the UK. Sorry to just go on a complete tangent, but when you said that the housing prices in the UK were increasing pretty exponentially, the equivalent of a town's worth of new immigrants coming to the UK every week. You have to build a city the size of Liverpool every year and a half to keep up with immigration.
Yeah.
So you can expect house prices to increase a lot in the future.
Yeah. I don't have anything intelligent to say because you're absolutely right. And you know what my concern is long term. Long term, I'm talking 10, 20, 30 years. Africa. Africa, nobody's really noticing this, or it seems as if nobody's noticing it, but its population is growing, is unrelenting. It will be 3 times the size of in just a few years. It's going to be crossing the 1.1 billion mark. It's becoming huge, and all of these people, it's really not that hard to get from Africa to Europe, to just overwhelm it. Right? And nobody seems to be noticing this. And nobody seems to be noticing that, African countries, for the most part, they don't end well, right? it has me very, very concerned. But
Me
nobody
too.
seems to be noticing this. Nobody wants to talk about it. I think that there are a lot of people who are noticing it. But if you ever talk about it, you're immediately a racist, fascist, blah, 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 Hitler's, long lost child or some shit like that, right? And so it's like you can't talk about things that are true, and it's driving me up the wall. And people are saying, free speech is not, free speech is hate speech, or what's the mantra for these crazy ass people? They're basically saying that whenever anybody talks about that, you're being bigoted. But it's not the case. You're looking at reality and some of the problems that we are having in the future, and nobody wants to talk about them. And it's just driving me a little bit nuts. And
just to answer your point, I had a look at the birth rates of some African countries, and the one that really struck me was Niger. Their birth rate per woman, I saw two figures. One was 6.7, and the other one was 7.5 to 1. And again, Ethiopia's population grew by over 30% in the last decade. It grew from 70 million to over 100 million. That's more than the population of Australia. That's 1.5 times the population of Australia it grew by. What the hell are you going to do when you can't feed all these people?
These people are going to start looking for food, and what do you think that's going to mean, right? I'm very, very worried that these people are just going to start like invading other continents because it's so many people. Okay, and Africa is a big continent, but is it that big? Is it big enough? I don't know. To hold all these people, I don't know. Or maybe they'll wind up so many people they'll wind up starting to kill each other. Who knows? It's happened before. Rwanda was the fastest genocide in recorded history. So who knows what can happen there? But
according to, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, according to Genocide Watch, South Africa is one step away from being an outright genocide. For the Boer, from what I see. So,
and that, isn't that despicable? They are going to kill off every single white farmer, in every single white person in South Africa. And yet all of these people who are either of British descent or Dutch descent, and neither the UK nor Holland wants to take them in. These people are literal refugees from a genocidal regime that has said outright that they want to kill them. And, UK and Holland, no, you white people, you got to stay where you are and take the genocide. Well, we're going to accept all these other people who have nothing in common with us, and it's like, what the hell is going on? It's like an insanity. It's like a sickness of the mind, God. Well, we're ranting again, or I'm ranting again.
No, it is an insanity, but I think that the white countries just need extra diversity. They need to grit their teeth and just shut up about it. There was a really good point put across by Mark Stein about the birth rates and how quickly it can switch. If your country's 90% of the population had a birth rate of 1.3 and 10% of the population had a birth rate of 3.5, in 2 generations, they're pretty much 50-50.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in.
Yeah.
And don't forget, these people are a lot more fertile than us. These people have children a lot younger than us, and they live off your tax dollars a lot of the time. Something like 50% of all imams in Europe live off welfare, and something like 80% of all Muslims collect some form of welfare as well. In the UK, 50.5% of the adult population is dependent on some state funding in some way or another. How the hell are you meant to shrink the size of the state and try to get things more to a natural level and to maybe save and preserve your culture when everyone's dependent on it? They're not going to give it up.
No. Yeah. Have you thought about that? 50.5%, that means that a majority of the people depend on the minority for existence.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. It's just thinking about that, it just, it's ridiculous. And my thinking is that at this point in time, it's smart to be looking for a place where you can stay permanently that will be out of the way of any of these problems. some out-of-the-way country that because of its isolation will not attract hordes of immigrants who will overrun it, and that can sort of like where you can sit out the decay of the West. My money right now is on New Zealand. I think that would be a good corner of the world to go to. I mean, it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. Nobody wants to go there. As a postcard, right? It's relatively stable, and it's relatively self-sufficient. It grows enough food to feed itself. So, and it has plenty of fresh water, which I think in the long term will be a very hard commodity to come by. That's something that worries me. Yeah, it seems that New Zealand would be a spot. The other place I've been thinking is southern Patagonia in both Argentina and Chile, because that's very isolated, lots of water, lots of land, lots of food. A little bit of a miserable weather kind of situation, but other than that, it's fine. But then I can't think of any other place like that, like those two places. I mean, I'd think that New Zealand is the #1 spot because it's just so perfectly isolated, perfectly away from everything. I mean, when you go to New Zealand, you really got away from everything, right? Because what happens if the whole thing collapses? And the other thing that I don't think people have realized is that right now we live in this incredible civilization where you can get anywhere within 24 hours. No matter where you are, in 24 hours, you can be on any other spot on the globe, which is a remarkable achievement, right? Who's to say that this is going to last forever? I don't think it's going to last forever. I think there are lots of ways that this could decay very quickly. Remember a few years ago, there was this volcano in Iceland, and all of a sudden, all the flights from Europe to North America were pretty much canceled because of this volcano.
Yeah, it had some really unpronounceable name.
I forget the name completely. I just remember the event, right? And it wasn't just for a few days or one day. It was for a while. It was like a complicated thing, right? They had to deal with it, right? And that was just, a relatively minor natural disaster, right? Imagine if there's some sort of serious financial cataclysm, Okay, with that happy thought, I'm going to call it a stream, and I'll let you go. But it's been a great conversation. We pretty much went everywhere and solved absolutely nothing, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me, Coach. Can I tell the audience where they can find me?
Absolutely, please do.
Oh yeah, look me up on Twitter. It's at Orwell Goode. I have a YouTube channel where I do these streams regularly, and that's just Orwell Goode. I'm on Gab at Always Liberty. Like my Facebook page, and thank you very much for the opportunity to have these conversations. And saludo desde Chile.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. And by the way, just so everybody knows, as soon as this goes up, I'll be putting the links to both Orwell Goode's Twitter and his YouTube. And anything else you want me to put up there? Twitter, YouTube, anything else?
No, that's absolutely fine. Okay. Gab, it's just Always Liberty.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about Gab. I want to talk about Gab and that whole situation with what's his name? Anglin? It was with Anglin, right? Or no, somebody else.
Andrew Anglin.
Yeah, it was with Anglin.
I can't pronounce Weeb's name. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll get to that one on the next one. So I'll leave people with the information to get to Orwell Goode. It's just one funny dude. Okay, I think I totally crimped his style because Orwell Goode is just like just an incredibly good feed. You guys have to check him out. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. Orwell Goode, it was great talking to you, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And to everybody, thank you so much for listening in, and I will see you soon.